Are you the man who scouts the bathroom the second you walk into a restaurant before you even sit down at the table? In one clinical trial, a group taking a simple berry supplement saw their urgency episodes drop by more than half. I'm 83, and these days I can sit through a 2-hour movie without once thinking about where the nearest exit sign is. What changed wasn't a prescription. It was 5 cheap fruits most men over 60 walk right past in the grocery store, and I'm going to walk you through every one of them. I sat through my grandson's entire graduation ceremony last spring, start to finish, and never once had that jolt of, I need to go right now. For years, urgency ran my life more than the nighttime trips ever did. It wasn't just needing to go, it was that sudden, sharp signal that gave me maybe 90 seconds of warning, sometimes less. I missed part of a sermon at church, power walking to the men's room. I turned down a fishing trip because I couldn't picture myself an hour from a bathroom with that alarm going off in my body whenever it felt like it. I told my wife I just didn't like sitting still that long anymore. That wasn't true. I was scared of my own bladder, and I was too proud to say it out loud. I started keeping a mental inventory of every bathroom on every route I ever drove. The gas station 2 miles from the house, the diner with the sign that said, customers only, that I ignored anyway, the church itself, which had 2, so I always knew which one was less likely to have a line. That's not living. That's running your whole day around an organ the size of a fist and pretending to everyone around you that nothing's changed. Nobody explained why. My doctor had 8 minutes, a blood pressure cuff, and a list of other things to check that day. There was no room in that appointment to sit down and walk through what was actually happening, why a bladder that used to hold for 3 hours was suddenly screaming at me after 1. There's a particular embarrassment to urgency that's different from the nighttime trips. At night, nobody sees you get up. During the day, urgency happens in front of people, in the middle of a conversation, at the dinner table, standing in line at the pharmacy. I got good at a certain kind of smile, the one that says, I'll be right back, while my whole body was quietly panicking. I stopped drinking coffee with friends because the 2 things together, caffeine and conversation that ran long, were a guaranteed problem. I told myself I'd just gotten less social in my old age. That wasn't the truth either. Here's the piece nobody laid out for me. Urgency like this usually comes from a bladder wall that's become irritated and overreactive, sometimes made worse by a prostate that's grown large enough to press against the base of the bladder itself, so the bladder muscle contracts on a hair trigger even when it isn't actually full. It's not weakness, and it isn't in your head. It's an irritated bladder wall firing signals too early and too often. Add in a narrowed channel from an enlarged prostate, and you get exactly what I lived with. Urgency, and then relief that never quite feels complete once you get there. And there's a timing piece too. Anything that irritates the bladder lining further, caffeine, alcohol, even certain acidic foods, tends to make an already jumpy bladder fire even sooner, which is part of why the same day can feel fine in the morning and unbearable by evening. For 11 years, the bathroom ran my nights. Up at midnight, up at 2, up again at 5, a weak little stream each time and never quite empty. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, knowing I'd drag through the next day half awake. I thought it was just age. It wasn't. Here's what no one ever sat me down to explain. The prostate crowds the channel your urine runs through, so the bladder never fully drains, it just fills right back up within the hour. That's why you go and go again. It was never weakness. It was never getting old. And the pills they kept handing me, they left me dizzy every time I stood, gave me that strange, dry finish where almost nothing came, and the nights never changed. But there is a gentle way to help that bladder empty the way it's meant to, without any of that. At 83, I finally sleep through the night again. I'll show you exactly what in this video, and if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Once I understood the bladder wall itself was the real problem, not just getting older, I started looking at what actually calms an irritated bladder lining, and 5 ordinary fruits kept showing up in the research, every one of them cheap enough to buy on a fixed income. The first, and the one with the strongest research behind it specifically for men, is cranberry. Not the sugary juice cocktail, the real fruit, or an unsweetened concentrate. In a randomized trial of men with lower urinary tract symptoms, the group taking a cranberry supplement reported significantly fewer symptoms and better quality of life than the group on placebo. Separately, in a trial focused specifically on urgency, one group taking a dried cranberry supplement saw daily urgency episodes drop by more than half over 6 months, though I want to be honest that this particular urgency trial was conducted in women, and the strict statistical analysis across the full group didn't reach significance. It was the more detailed analysis that showed the strongest effect. I'm including it because the mechanism, calming an irritated bladder lining, applies to men too, and it's the same mechanism behind the trial that was actually done in men. Second, blueberries. Blueberries are one of the most concentrated sources of a class of plant compounds researchers have studied for their calming effect on inflamed tissue throughout the body, including the lining of the bladder. A half cup a day, fresh or frozen, is one of the cheapest additions on this entire list. I buy the frozen bag, not the fresh little containers, because it lasts weeks and costs a fraction of the price. There's no reason this one needs to be expensive to work. Third, pumpkin. Botanically a fruit, even though it lives in the vegetable aisle. In a pilot study of 60 men, a daily pumpkin seed extract was linked to roughly a 30% drop in overall urinary symptoms over 3 months. I want to be straight with you, though, because I've seen this ingredient oversold. A much larger trial of over 1,400 men found no significant difference from placebo on the main symptom score after a full year. What did move in that larger study was the amount of urine left behind after going, which dropped specifically in the pumpkin group. So the honest read is mixed on urgency itself, more promising on emptying completely, still worth including, just not oversold. Fourth, pomegranate. Rich in polyphenol compounds, researchers have studied for general anti-inflammatory support in the pelvic region. The evidence here is still early, but pomegranate seeds or an unsweetened juice a few times a week is a reasonable, low-cost addition alongside the stronger evidence above. I toss a handful of the seeds on oatmeal a couple of mornings a week. It's not a habit that needs any real planning. Fifth, apples. The most overlooked fruit on this list and maybe the cheapest. Apples are rich in quercetin, a compound researchers have studied for its role calming inflammation in the lower urinary tract specifically. It won't replace the stronger cranberry evidence, but 1 apple a day, skin on, adds another layer to the same calming approach. Between the 5 of these, you're looking at maybe $4 or $5 a week total, less than most men spend on coffee in 2 days. None of these 5 fruits are dramatic on their own. What they add up to, together, is a bladder wall that's less inflamed and less quick to panic, which is the actual target, not just white-knuckling your way through another dinner out while quietly scanning the room for the restroom sign. And because every one of them is something you can buy at a regular grocery store, there's no waiting on a delivery or hunting down a specialty shop to get started. You could pick up 3 of these 5 on your very next trip down the produce aisle. None of these replace whatever your doctor already has you on for urgency or an enlarged prostate. Please keep that relationship going. What these 5 fruits do together is support a bladder wall that's calmer and less quick to fire that 90-second alarm alongside your treatment, never instead of it. I go to the grocery store now and browse every aisle at my own pace, no scouting the restroom sign the second I walk through the door. There's a man named Roy, 76, a widower in Sacramento, who told me he'd stopped going to his own church potluck because he couldn't sit through the fellowship hour afterward without that sharp urgency hitting him mid-conversation. His late wife used to be the one who'd quietly steer him toward the restroom before it got bad, and after she passed, he said he just stopped going altogether rather than manage it alone in a room full of people. He started with cranberry and blueberries, nothing else changed. He said the urgency eased within about a month, though it took closer to 10 weeks before he trusted it enough to sit through the whole potluck again. He was honest, that trust took longer to rebuild than the symptom itself did. He was still seeing his own urologist the entire time. I'm not promising you his exact timeline. I'm telling you because his story sounded exactly like mine. So here's what I use, a few drops every single morning. And let me be honest about why it works. One herb on its own nudges one thing, but your prostate answers best when several signals are calmed at the same time. The flow, the emptying, the pressure behind it. That's why what I take brings them together, concentrated, working as one, not a single ingredient hoping to do everything. Stronger stream, full emptying, quiet nights, your freedom back. And none of the trade-offs, no dizziness, no dry finish, nothing taken from you as a man. It's linked right under this video. Go see it for yourself. It won't replace good sleep or your own doctor. It's there to support your body. At 83, I sleep through. It is not too late for you. Here's what I want you to walk away with. Urgency isn't a character flaw, and it isn't something you just have to manage by memorizing every bathroom in town. It's an irritated bladder wall firing too soon, and there are real, studied ways to calm that, starting with fruit that costs less than a cup of coffee, alongside whatever your doctor already has you doing. You don't have to overhaul your whole diet in one weekend either. Roy started with 2 of the 5, and I started the same way myself, adding the rest in slowly over a couple of months, once the first changes had already become habit. I think about the man who scouted every restaurant bathroom before he'd even looked at the menu, and the friend I stopped meeting for coffee because I was too proud to explain why. And I think about the man I am now, 83, sitting through a whole movie without a single thought about the exit sign, browsing every aisle of the grocery store at my own pace like I used to. I didn't cure anything. I just stopped ignoring what my bladder was actually asking for. None of this happened overnight for me, and I don't want to pretend it did. It was closer to 6 weeks before I noticed the difference in a real, undeniable way, and closer to 3 months before I stopped bracing out of pure habit every time I sat down somewhere new. If any part of this sounds like your own life, tell me in the comments. Tell me the last time urgency embarrassed you, and how long you've been quietly working around it. I read every comment myself. And if you want the next honest breakdown like this one, subscribe, because 8 minutes with your doctor was never going to cover it.